Oh, hi, Kira.
Oh, hey, Ashley.
Hey, what are you reading?
I'm actually reading a parable that's found in the Bible, which reminds me, we're going to be starting a new series on some of the parables that Jesus taught.
No way! That's so exciting! But what's exactly a parable?
That's a good question. A parable is a super cool story that Jesus told his disciples.
Oh, I love the stories that Jesus tells. They are really cool, but they can also be a bit confusing at times too, I have to admit. Why do you think that Jesus used these stories instead of just telling his disciples what he wanted to say?
Well, everyone loves stories, and they make things so much easier to remember.
That is true. Just like when we talked about the story of Jonah, that helps remind me to obey. But why are the parables so difficult to understand?
Well, Jesus actually talks about why parables can be a bit confusing in Matthew 13:10-17. Do you want to read part of that?
Sure, I'd love to. Would you want to join me?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll start. So, his disciples came and asked him, "Why do you use parables when you talk to the people?" He replied, "You are permitted to understand the secrets of the kingdom of heaven, but others are not. To those who listen to my teaching, more understanding will be given, and they will have an abundance of knowledge. But for those who are not listening, even what little understanding they have will be taken away from them. That is why I use these parables."
And then it continues to say, for they look, but they don't really see. They hear, but they don't really listen or understand. This fulfills the prophecy of Isaiah that says, when you hear what I say, you will not understand. When you see what I do, you will not comprehend. For the hearts of these people are hardened, and their ears cannot hear. And they have closed their eyes, so their eyes cannot see, and their ears cannot hear, and their hearts cannot understand, and they cannot turn to me and let me heal them.
But blessed are your eyes because they see, and your ears because they hear. I tell you the truth, many prophets and righteous people longed to see what you see, but they didn't see it. And they longed to hear what you hear, but they didn't hear it.
Yeah, so we see that there were a lot of people who came to listen to what Jesus had to say. But the thing is, not all of these people were really interested in learning anything from Jesus.
Yeah. See, some maybe just wanted to see him do a miracle or see this man that everybody was talking about.
And there were probably some religious leaders that just wanted to try and catch Jesus saying something wrong so that they could arrest him.
Only the people who were interested in learning about the kingdom of heaven and the salvation were able to understand the stories that Jesus was telling.
That those other people's hearts were hardened because they stopped listening to what God was saying to them and didn't want to do what God was telling them to do.
We don't want to close our minds and harden our hearts to God. But what would the opposite of that be then?
The opposite of that is having an open mind and a soft heart that is willing to learn from God and allow Him to help change us. So, in order to understand the parables, we have to keep an open mind, eager to learn new things about God and the kingdom of heaven. And we have to have soft, humble hearts, willing to let the way we feel and therefore the way we act around people be changed by God.
We also need to ask God to help us understand the Bible. We ask God for help by praying.
And we need to live out what we learn. If you go to school and learn how to add or multiply, can you go home and never think about them again and still remember them a year from now? Probably not. We need to practice the things we learn. That includes the things we learn from the Bible too.
Yep. So, to review, we need to have humble hearts and an open mind to want to hear the stories that Jesus is telling us. And we need to pray that God will help us understand the stories. And then we need to practice what we learn.
Yes, the parables are such cool stories and they can teach us some really amazing things and how to live our lives as children of God. I'm so excited to share these stories with you.
I do too. They're some of my favorites. So, for this week's challenge, We are challenging you to pick a Bible story, any Bible story at all. It could be one of your favorite Bible stories that you've read before, or maybe it's one that you've never actually read and maybe it's one your parents suggest. Then we're going to be practicing what we've just talked about. So read the story, maybe read it more than once, and read it with an open heart and get excited about what God is teaching you, and then see what he's going to be teaching you. And then after that, talk with your parents about what you read and then what you learned from it.
Yeah, not only will you get a chance to read such a cool story, but you'll also be able to learn some really cool things to apply to your life. We'll see you next week. Thanks for joining.
Bye.